Hi, I'm Trevor Simpson, Associate Editor for Hotel News Now. Canada's wildfire season typically runs from May to September, and so far, it's been according to schedule. What hasn't been, though, is the scale of destruction via wildfires across the country this year. For the Canadian television network, Canada surpassed its known historic record for total area burned by wildfires in one season on June 27th, when it surpassed the 88,000 square kilometers mark. That number this year is now north of 165,000 kilometers at the time of recording, according to the Canadian Interagency Forest Fires Center, so it's not far away from doubling the past record. For scale, last year there was only a little more than 13,000 kilometers of area burned. More than 155,000 people have been forced to evacuate from their homes as of mid-August, which is the highest mark in a year over the past 40 years. I would like to now welcome in Laura Baxter, Director of Hospitality Analytics in Canada at CoStar Group. Laura, how are you?
Hi, Trevor. Thanks so much for having me. I'm doing well, thank you.
So my first question is, with all of the evacuations across the board, which areas have seen the biggest rise in occupancy and which have seen the sharpest decline?
Yeah, so there were more than 20,000 people that were evacuated from Yellowknife and communities across the Northwest Territories for about 3 weeks. So some of those evacuees headed south into northern Alberta towards Grand Prairie and Edmonton, and others were flown into Calgary and as far as Winnipeg. So we've seen occupancy in both Edmonton and Calgary, where many of those evacuees went, increase about 25 to 30%. So many of those evacuees were staying there over that time frame as they awaited news for reentry. Whereas in British Columbia, we did see occupancy drop because a lot of the evacuated residents were from Kelowna and surrounding communities. There was also a short travel ban to that area too. So occupancy in Kelowna dropped about 30% that week of the fire, and it dropped by about 20% the second week, kind of comparing year on year.
What has the scale of destruction been in terms of hotel properties?
So the extent of the damage is still being realized to an extent, but so far a couple of resort properties have been reported to have been damaged. So the REO Rafting and Yoga Resort just north of Boston Bar, BC was reported to be about 80% destroyed. Also, the Lake Okanagan Resort on West Side Road in West Kelowna was also destroyed by the McDougall Creek wildfire.
And sort of on that topic, in the United States, there's been a lot of discussion about insurance companies either hiking rates or backing out of areas such as South Florida because of the frequency of storm hazards. It might be a little too early to start speculation, but could there be the same kind of problem across Canada related to wildfires if this continues?
I think it's a good question. I have read that one of those resorts, the REO Rafting and Yoga Resort, that was destroyed, was actually unable to get insurance for forest fires over the past several years due to the nature of that business and the resort's location. But I do think that the intensity of this year's wildfire season could kind of prompt an increased onus on applicants to take responsibility to minimize their exposure to wildfire risk.
Have there been any hotels that are in the areas unaffected by the fires that have stepped up to house displaced residents? And how has this affected occupancy in those areas?
Yeah, so I guess just kind of what I was talking about previously, many of the evacuees from the Northwest Territories ended up in Edmonton and Calgary, and there was an increase over the last couple of weeks that we've got data for about from 25 to 30%. But it's really interesting to hear some of the stories that are coming out of the area of just kind of everyone within the community really stepping up and helping where they can. So some businesses have been donating food to evacuees. And kind of other attractions and recreation centers have opened up, offering complimentary visits and access to facilities for the evacuees. So it's a real sense of kind of communities coming together and everyone pulling together to make a bad situation a little bit better.
And obviously, most of the destruction is happening in more resort areas. Has there been any impact on demand in major markets such as Toronto, which have seen, the smoke and the smog and pollution happening?
So back in June, there were some large fires in Quebec, in remote areas in Quebec, and that and even near Ottawa. So a lot of that smoke kind of traveled down to Toronto and really impacted the quality of air. Also, all the way down through to the eastern seaboard. I heard the smoke traveled all the way to places like Virginia. So I do think, and certainly this is just anecdotal, I have heard that some hotels were seeing cancellations due to that poor air quality. So yes, there has been a kind of a knock-on impact in some of our major cities, but mostly, from the more recent fires, it's more just kind of evacuees being displaced and staying in hotels that has impacted the major cities.
Sure. How have the fires impacted international inbound travel?
Yeah, so I had a look at the data for June, and compared to May, we didn't see many international inbound visits drop. So, although international travel is still kind of recovering to pre-pandemic levels, we didn't see a huge drop off when those fires were taking place in June. More recently, if you have a look in Kelowna, occupancy did drop off that 30% and then 20% the following week. So if you use that kind of as a proxy for arrivals to that area, I expect that there was a bit of drop off, although we're still kind of waiting on the official data.
Gotcha. And then obviously this year it's been historic, the amount of wildfires and area burned. So it's not necessarily going to be like this every single year, but do you think that this will have any impact on future bookings in Canada?
Yeah, I think it could. The news could deter some tourists, but I do think it's really important for everyone to realize that wildfires typically happen in remote areas and that wildfires near populated areas is still not the norm.
Okay. Laura, those were all the questions that I had for you. Is there anything that you would like to add?
No, just that my heart goes out to all of the communities that have been impacted and really hope that the situation out west and throughout Canada improves.
Absolutely. Well said. Laura, thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
Thanks so much for having me, Trevor.
Hi, I'm Davon Reed.
I'm Omari Head.
And I'm Chris Henry.
We're the hosts of the Next Gen and Lodging podcast on the Hotel News Now podcast network. It's a monthly show in which we interview a new generation of hoteliers to get their insights into a variety of disciplines and topics, from finance to food and beverage and hotel operations. Listen to us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.